Amen. I remember vividly this one time in the past when I was very nervous. I was getting ready to ask this young lady to marry me. And it was, I don't know, you get the little sweats going, you start worrying about what it's going to be like and what is she going to say. But wow, I mean, I was just, it was a great day for me. And I remember the day vividly when I met up with her and we were talking at school and things were going really well. And so I was like, okay, this is it. This is the time. I've got to do this. So I turned to that young lady and I asked her if she would marry me. And she said no. And I was just heartbroken. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. And I remember at that time that there was also another young lady came up and started talking to me, and she was kind of cute too. So I asked her instead to marry me, and she said yes. And that's when our kindergarten teacher said, it's time for you to head out to recess. You got to get going. And yeah. By the way, that's a fake story. And by the way, I checked it with Heather because I started telling her this last night. And she's like, what kind of weird story are you talking about? But it highlights this idea that we often have these great plans. We have great plans on what things are going to do in our life, how things are going to work out. And sometimes those plans unravel. And when those plans unravel, it becomes difficult for us to continue on because everything is now out of our control. My goal today is that if your plans unravel, that you would have such confidence in who Jesus is, that if all your plans fail and change, you would still rest comfortably in the hands of Christ, because his plans never fail. His plans don't change. When he sets something up, it is incredible. We're going to be seeing that today in this particular passage, and we're going to be doing it a little bit differently than what I had originally thought as I was getting ready and studying this passage. Part of my heart kind of breaks just a smidgen, just a small amount, for the religious leaders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, the other priests, the group that is known as the Sanhedrin. This group is a large grouping of people, 71. Now, they always had an odd vote. That was the chief priest would always cast the deciding vote. No, I'm sorry, 73, because there were 72 in the Sanhedrin, and he was the 73rd vote. And what's happened is they have had this plan in place. And now we're thankful that this particular plan, though it unravels for them, is the exact plan that God has in place. You see, they've got a plan to kill Jesus. They want him dead. They are so upset at everything that is happening. He is such a great following. People are listening to him. People want to do what he says as opposed to their system that they had set up. And so they continually, seeing him, get more and more angry. So they've got the plan now in place. They're going to get him. They just need to make sure they don't do it during Passover. They're not going to do it during Passover. There's too many people. The crowds are going to be sympathetic to him. We can't do it. And all of a sudden their plans have to change. Why? Because someone from the inner circle of Jesus's grouping shows up and starts talking to them saying, I can deliver him to you. And it'll only cost you 30 pieces of silver. And I'm sure they had a quick little huddle like, we said we weren't going to do this during Passover, but I think we may need to change this. This is our opportunity. How else are we going to get Jesus and get him privately alone at night? So they say, we're going to arrest him. Now, before the arrest is made, we are certain that they started making some other plans, because their goal is they have to put him to death. But they've got a problem. The Jewish nation is being occupied at this moment by the Romans. One of the things that the Roman government did to help control the population was they took away some of their rights especially some of their religious rights. So one of the rights that got taken away was the right of capital punishment. They told the Jewish people, you are not allowed to sentence someone to death and then execute that person. That right was only allowed for the Roman government. So now this becomes problematic because the Jewish people are like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to say? Because we've got to have a plan in place so that when we get the charges leveled against them, we've got to take them to the government, and the charge has to be really, really good. And they've got to believe it. So, like, one of the charges, though it would be capital punishment for a Jewish person, which is blasphemy, there is no way they're going to make that charge stick with the Romans. So they come up with a great plan. They send the priests out, and they start bribing people. We know this from another gospel writer who says that there were people, witnesses that were brought forth, and they said, hey, we got this plan in place that's going to be great. You're going to go, you're going to start handing out some money, and we're going to talk about how he wants to destroy the temple. Now that is punishable by death. So they're like, this is going to be great. All right. So they send out all the priests. They've got Jesus is coming in. This is great. Hey, wake some people up. We need to make sure that this is going to work. So all the bribes are now out. Everything is placed. And then, I don't know if someone at some point said, Mr. High Priest, sir, are we going to be suspending our rules for this? Because we can't arrest someone at night, and we can't have a trial at night. We also know that he as the defendant, has to have counsel. So, and one of those people of the Sanhedrin has to become the counsel for the accused. Who's going to do that? Is he going to be allowed to speak? And then how do we make sure that all of this stuff is legitimate because it's all happening at night? I don't know if it was a high priest. I don't know if it was just the others. They said, you know what? All the rules are suspended. We're going to get them out. Some of these rules were pretty important. Not only the ones that I mentioned, but there was also a couple other interesting rules. For instance, if someone was convicted by the Sanhedrin and that vote was unanimous, after polling all 73 of the Sanhedrin, if all of them said guilty, then by law the person was set free. And the reason why is they said someone somewhere always has to have a sense of grace and mercy. The Sanhedrin said if all of us are so angry and all upset that this person is deserving to die, then he should live because we are being blinded by our own rage. They also said if they convicted someone of a capital punishment and they were going to be put to death, then by their own rules they said we need 24 hours to sleep on this. And the reason why is, again, if they're blinded with rage, they've got to have time to cool off. And maybe at that point someone says, I think I've changed my mind on this one. Great rules. They also had another rule that when they polled the Sanhedrin, the first person to vote is the youngest member of the Sanhedrin. And the reason why that is they didn't want the older, more seasoned veterans of the Sanhedrin to ram through something that maybe some younger people would say, I think I might question that. So what they did is they started from the youngest so that when that person voted, they were not being tainted by the last vote. And who was the last vote? That was the chief priest. He was the one that says the final vote. So all of these rules are in place. Well, as we read the story, let's see if you can find out how the story changes, how the plans that they have are all starting to unravel. Verse 53. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, and teachers of the law came together. So the whole Sanhedrin is assembled. And again, this is in the middle of the night, which is really problematic. It's sad that this is the way it is, but that's what they're going to do. And we know that Peter is around. Verse 54, Peter followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. We also find out that the person that got him into the courtyard was this young man named John, who had some ins with them. And so Peter is being let into this courtyard, and we'll find out next week what actually happens with Peter. So verse 55, the chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find anything. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. This is problematic. The plan is unraveling. They talked about it with these witnesses, and they had special rules in place, and apparently they followed those rules, where they didn't allow the witnesses to come together and talk ahead of time. Otherwise, they would be able to get their story straight. So everyone stands up and starts testifying about what Jesus has done, and they can't get anyone to agree on a charge. But that's okay. They have another plan. This is where the bribery's coming in. They're like, hey, if we pay someone off, they'll say exactly what we want them to say, and everything's going to work great. Well, what happens with those people? Verse 57, then some stood up and gave false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another not made by man. Which is interesting because that's not quite what Jesus had said. This is actually going back. Only John actually records this message where Jesus is looking at the temple and he says, you see this temple? In 3 days it'll be destroyed. It'll be destroyed, and then 3 days later it will be built again. But he's not talking about human hands. And of course, we, looking at this, know he's not referencing like the actual temple. He's referencing himself. He is going to die, and then in 3 days later, will be resurrected once again. So they start giving this testimony. Do they all agree on this? Again, it's hilarious. Verse 59, yet even then, their testimony did not agree. Their plans are unraveling. We just paid off I don't know how many people, and we can't get two people to agree, because that's what you need. I know we often talk about it in the terms of corporate worship, but it's less than that. It's a throwback, especially to Deuteronomy, where it says in a court of law, you've got to have 2 or 3 witnesses giving the same story, because where 2 or 3 are gathered, I'm in the midst of it. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, that's where truth is going to be. When you have people agreeing on what's happening, that's when you know I'm in the midst of it, because God says I'm a God of truth. And after all the payouts, the plans continue to unravel. I'm not going to lie. I kind of feel for him a little bit. They want their money back. I'd be so upset, like, oh my gosh, Bob, I told you, this is what give me that money. All right, hi, everyone. Yeah, and they're giving the stink eye to all these people. I would want my money back too. It's okay, because there's another plan you can do. If we can't get 2 or 3 people to agree, even though we paid them off, all we have to do is get him to incriminate himself. If he is questioned, then if he slips up and says something, then we'll get him, right? I love that movie, A Few Good Men, right? You know, he's baiting him, and then he's saying, you can't handle the truth, right? And then Jack Nicholson gets taken away. It's great. I love that thing. If we could just get him to incriminate himself, we're going to be set. So the chief priest pivots. And what does he do? That's the next verse. Verse 66, then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Now again, I'm not sure if there was like the junior priest saying, There's a law that we have in the Mishnah that says you're not allowed to directly talk to the witness unless he wants to actually speak. You're going to do it anyway. Okay, that's cool. All right, yeah, all right. We want him dead, right? We want him dead? Yeah, this is a good idea. Chief priest smart. He knows what he's doing. All right, let's see what happens. What happens? According to the text, verse 61, but Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Oh, man. And of course, Jesus is doing this, one, to fulfill Scripture. As a lamb is silent before the shearers, so shall he be in front of his accusers. Jesus is smart. I don't know if he's aware of all the laws and rules that they have. I'm sure he is. And so he's not going to answer because there's something that is super important that needs to happen. God has a plan. This plan is going exactly according to what Jesus had said. The chief priests, and the teachers of the law, all of them, their plans are unraveling. So the chief priest pivots once again. Okay, well, he's not going to say anything about the temple. By now, I'm sure his rage is getting even higher and higher. He is looking for something, anything. We've got to get him. How are we going to do this? And so he just blurts out. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? Well, hold on a second. This is a problem. I don't know, again, a junior priest. If he answers that question, we've moved from the destruction of the temple to blasphemy. This ain't gonna work. Blasphemy is that's not a good enough charge. Because we hate it. I mean, all the Jewish people are like, yeah, blasphemy. If you committed blasphemy, what you could do is right then grab some rocks and start killing the person. Now, it has to be, there was some debate on some of the resources that I was reading, but I think I have to lean towards the technical definition of blasphemy, which would be to actually say the name of Yahweh in some horrible way. That was the technical form of blasphemy. So that's the reason why we have with the consonants in the Old Testament, we have it as Yahweh, but if you repoint it with the vowels, you come up with the word Jehovah. So that was their workaround. Let's not say Yahweh. Of course, they were like, let's not say that word, and instead Jehovah, because it's the same vowels, same consonants, different vowels. Even to this day, if you go on to strictly Jewish sites, one of the ones that I love to look at because it gives me great information when people ask the questions, it's directly to these Jewish leaders, scholars, rabbis. It's called Jew, J-E-W-F-A-Q, Jew Frequently Asked Questions. And if you look at some of their answers, when they type it out, they do something very special when they talk about God. They'll put G_D. They drop the O. That way, they've not taken the Lord's name in vain because that is blasphemous. And so now, these priests, I don't know if someone's like, I don't know how much I really like this. But if this is the plan, then this is the plan. If we can get them to say God's name in vain. Well, what was Jesus' answer? Jesus' answer is a very carefully crafted answer. Jesus himself is not flustered. Jesus himself is not worried. Jesus is not concerned about the future. Jesus is not freaking out that something is happening that is outside of his control. He so calmly and coolly understands that God is in control no matter what, and that their plans are all unraveling, but as those plans unravel, God's plan is coming squarely into view. It's a great reminder for us. Maybe you had a really good plan for retirement. I'm going to do work till I'm 65. My 401k is doing really well. All I have to do is just wait, and then once I hit that age, I report. I start taking my Social Security, and then I start receiving those benefits, and then lo and behold, The stock market crashes, your house is now underwater, and you owe more than was due on it, and your house is now worth less, and all of your retirement stuff drops, and all of your plans completely and utterly go unraveled. Yeah, and then throw in some medical bills, throw in the fact that maybe your grandkids need braces, and your kids can't support this. All of a sudden, everything starts to unravel. Or you're newly married, and you are so excited to start off your marriage, and you have talked about the plans, and the plan said, we're going to take a couple years off after we get married, and we're going to travel the world. And as we travel the world, we'll be able to get to know each other better, and this is so wonderful and great. So you enjoy your wedding, you enjoy your honeymoon, and then a couple months later, the wife starts throwing up and craving pickles all the time. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, I had this plan that we were going to travel for a while, and lo and behold, now you have a kid. Hopefully you realize that was not us, but this was actually a story of some good friends of ours. We actually waited 5 years before Bubba came on the scene. Our plans were great because they were in line with God's plans. Right, step back with a lightning hit. Well, because I had great plans. I had great plans for my oldest son. I'd love to teach my oldest son all about being a pastor. It'd be great to go out and play sports with him. And again, you have plans, and all of a sudden, all those plans change. And you're like, wait, this is not what I wanted. This is not how I planned everything to be. And do we have the confidence and the trust in God that even when our plans fall apart, we are confident that God's plans never fail? And so if my plans are unraveling, they have to unravel so that God's plans can prevail. Maybe you have a plan of graduation, and after graduating, boom, you know exactly what you're going to do. You have trained your whole life to become a school teacher, and all of a sudden, you find out that your parents are getting a divorce. You're going to have to drop out of college, and you're going to have to go and start working right away because you don't have the funds. And all of your plans, they're all just unraveling. And what do? I know a lot of your stories, and some of those stories are really difficult to hear. Because you are just like me. You have plans, I have plans. I had plans about Searchlight. I think I've mentioned this to you before. By this time in my ministry, Searchlight was going to have about 2,000 in worship. Because these are good plans, right? And then all of a sudden, plans unravel and plans change. And plans change so much, and do I have the confidence to trust that if my plans are unraveling, that means God's plans are much better, and I can trust in that. I know that you have plans for the future. You have plans for having kids. You have plans for retiring. I don't think anyone here has a plan to get cancer, correct? I don't think anyone here has a plan to get a divorce, right? I don't think anyone here has a plan for someone important in their life to die. But those things happen sometimes. And do we trust that God has a plan for you? Are your plans unraveling? Maybe God is going to be doing something better. So the priest asked him, are you the Christ? Which would be roughly translated, are you the Messiah? Are you the one that we've been looking for and waiting for all this time? The Son of the Blessed One, right? He can't say Yahweh or God, because this would get him in trouble. So he is freaking out. He's foaming at the mouth. He is doing everything in his power to hold on to his plans, just like we do with an iron grip, and the veins start bulging and our knuckles start turning white as we hold on tightly to what we have. And Jesus says, I am. Which doesn't sound very important to us, right? It sounds like he's just answering the question, right? Like, are you the Son of the Blessed One? And he's like, I am. But in this, as we've seen it through other scripture passages, by invoking this particular phrase in this particular way, he is hearkening back to the burning bush in Exodus. He harkens back to other times when God identifies who he is as the great I am, the one who was and is to come. This is his declaration. But he doesn't stop there, because I don't know if then the whole crowd started getting hushed, like, ooh, that was close. He came close to saying the words we can't say. Is he going to go further? And everyone's quiet. And Jesus, in a loud voice, then says, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. He's coming on the clouds. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. This is hearkening back now to the book of Daniel, where Daniel has this vision of someone like the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Father. And so they know what he's doing. He is making all these allusions, all of these statements. He has not yet invoked the holy name of God yet, but he has essentially said it without crossing the line of blasphemy. And this is where I think the chief priest is like, I think this is the best I got. This is the best plan I could come up with. And so he, understanding what Jesus says, yells out now in his loud voice, and he tears his clothes. I'm sorry, that was also another thing the high priest was never allowed to do. Even in the Old Testament, if the high priest's family member died, he was not allowed to grieve. He was not allowed to tear his robe and pour ashes on his head. He was required to stay in the moment as the priest and not engage emotionally. The chief priest especially was not supposed to be swayed by stuff emotionally to the point where he freaks out. I think we kind of have that even to this day. We expect people in high places to remain composed and professional. But this chief priest is not composed. He is white-knuckling his plan. And he must somehow convince the rest of the people that this man needs to die for what he just said. So he tears his clothes. Again, junior priest, is he allowed to do that? Wow, I have never seen anything like that before. And then he starts screaming, why do we need any more witnesses, he asked. You have heard the blasphemy. And then the chief priest, the junior priest, blasphemy? Yeah, well, okay, I kind of see it, but I don't know if this is really the charge that we're talking about. Blasphemy? Man, this charge is not going to fly. How are we going to still kill him? Maybe we just kill him. Maybe we just grab him and go and execute the guy. But they know if they do, they themselves will be executed by the Roman government. So the chief priest is starting to try to rile up the Sanhedrin. Like a great prosecutor, he is going to make sure and lay this man to waste and get everyone to back him up. Well, everyone except for one, because we cannot have a unanimous verdict. A unanimous verdict means the prisoner goes free. So hopefully, someone somewhere is going to say something. Now, I don't know if the chief priest is essentially saying, ban all the rules. This is what I would like to think happened. I can't prove this. There's no scriptural evidence for this, and there's not even other evidence for this. But I would like to think that because the chief priest has technically already voted, that as they get through all 72 of them, that the 72nd guy remembers that the high priest has already voted. And maybe he'll vote not guilty because, again, if he votes guilty and they all vote guilty, that's it. then the guy goes free. So they start polling him. I don't know, and maybe now they started with the youngest guy, or maybe they started with the oldest guy. You know, the chief priest started, so maybe it's the next guy and the next guy, and they start going through all of these people. So they get down to junior priest. What am I supposed to do here? Everyone's voting yes. I think so. And we do know this much. Middle of 64, they all condemned him as worthy of death. Again, I don't know, did junior priests be like, yeah, I guess maybe I'll vote yes, but is it acquittal? Are we following the rules? I don't know. I don't know if the high priest is like looking at him like, oh, no, vote no, because then we can do this. But he votes yes, he votes him to be condemned to death, and the high priest then like, well, you know what? We have already gone down this plan too far. Have you ever done that? Have you ever had a plan that you held on so tightly to that you were not going to give it up no matter what? And so you kept going. You're like, we are too deep into this. You've gone so far in it, you've got to somehow keep it going, even though everything is unraveling around you, even though God is showing his plan for your life, you're going to continue to hold on no matter what. Might I suggest for us that if the plans are unraveling and God is doing something different, we pause and we pray and we say, God, what are you doing? And there's nothing wrong with looking at him and saying, God, this is what I want. This is how I think it should play out. God, I'm the one here on the ground. I kind of know what's going on. I know you got like a whole universe. You're, spinning galaxies and doing amazing things like that, but you don't really understand the turmoil and the pressure that I'm under. And so I'm hoping maybe you will just listen to me, and this is what I want, and you're begging and you're pleading and you're praying. But somewhere deep down, you have that still small voice that's saying, trust me. How good is God? God is so good that if things are unraveling, we can trust he's still in control. When things are unraveling, it very well may be that God's plan, being greater than ours, is going to end up with something that would be better than we could ever imagine. Even though you look at the circumstances and you're like, this does not look good. As you think of the angels watching this whole proceedings, do they know what's going on? Are they aware of the plan? Are they like, wait a second, they're putting Jesus to death, but this is all wrong, and is he supposed to die? And I think that's where the forces of evil are gathering together and celebrating like, we've done it. We are going to kill him, and we have won. Lo and behold, the very plan of God comes where it looks like evil has triumphed and has won. And this great reversal, he flips it and defeats death itself. Could it be that even though you might be going through something where your plans have unraveled and it sure looks like evil is winning, it sure looks like bad people are in control? Does anyone feel like this at any time? I feel this, like 3 times a day, right? Like, God, just let me run everything. It'll be perfect. No, God's like, I got this. It's okay. Do we trust even if it looks like evil wins, your life is destroyed, all you can see ahead of you is constant turmoil? Do you trust that God has a plan that's even better? And that even in the midst of all of that, he will walk with you through that. He will always be there in the midst of your unraveled plans. Don't need to grab so tight. You don't need to panic. God sees you and he knows what's going on. And he says, I've got a plan. At this point, we don't know. It appears as if Jesus then goes back to being silent, because other prophecies need to be spoken, be fulfilled. Other prophecies need to come true. So verse 65, then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him and struck him with their fists. I don't know if you understand what that would, there's a new level of pain. I've never happened to me. But if you are going to receive a punch and you know it's coming, you can tighten your face or you can tighten your abs so that when the punch comes, it's somewhat deflected. The closest example that I come to in my life, after I thought through it, was a time I was riding my bike down a hill. My street, Manzanita, I was near the top. I was third house down, and it went down, and kind of nice. It's perfect for kids, right? You get going on the top, and then you have to walk the bike up, and it's terrible. And I remember as I'm coming down, and we're having a race with other kids, right? So I'm going, and let me tell you, I had a Huffy that was super fast, man. It was so good. Yeah, y'all remember the Huffies. And I'm going. It was blue. It was great. And we're getting to the bottom, and we all said we're going to take a left at the bottom, and we're going to head down towards our school, Markham Elementary. And so I take the turn, and I'm going fast, and I did it. I don't know why, but I wanted to see just how far ahead I was. So I'm looking back, and I'm like, man, I'm smoking them. And while I'm looking back, I hit a parked car. Let me tell you, that's a new type of jolt. Like, do you know has this ever happened to anyone else? Yes, yeah, there's times when it's like something hits you and you are not prepared for it, boom. Well, this is what Jesus is experiencing. He's got the blindfold. I don't know if the blindfold or a sack over the head or something, but they start punching him. Aren't they supposed to be waiting 24 hours? Aren't they supposed to be waiting so that their anger and their hatred can kind of subside a little bit? And this is that whole idea of God's mercy, and that when punishments come, they're supposed to be commensurate with the crime. And so we don't take action in the heat of the moment. All rules are out because their plan has to work. So they punch him, and they hit him. And they want to prove that this person does not actually have the credentials of being the Messiah. And so they ask him to prophesy. Doesn't say it specifically in Mark, but it does in others, where they'd punch him and they'd say, all right, who hit you? Who is the one that did it? Oh, you don't know which one. Here comes another. Bam. Who did that one? Hitting over and over and over again. So by the time this particular scene is over, Jesus' face is swelled up, maybe some broken teeth. He's spitting out blood, but he's not saying a word because everything is going according to plan. And now you can understand a little bit what happened last week when Jesus was praying, God, is it possible that I don't have to go through this? He saw it all. He knew exactly what was going to happen. It would look like evil is winning, but it's not. It's all going according to plan. And then the guards took him. This would be the chief priest guards. They had their own thing, and they're like, might as well get our licks in. Might as well do our punches. But now we've got the plan. The plan is Jesus dies. The problem is it's Passover, and the problem is we can't get an execution from the Romans. So someone better start coming up with a good plan to make sure this works. And they're strategizing and they're talking. And it's amazing to see what happens as this whole thing plays out. And that's where we will continue next week. because this plan's going to get personal. There's another plan for another person. A plan for a guy named Peter who is very brave, who is very religious, who has made the vow that no matter what happens, here's my plan. Everyone else is going to run, but I'm not. And I think he's sitting there going, look at this. I'm here. I'm here. This is great. I'm in the courtyard. Not too sure exactly what's going to be happening, but he's there in the courtyard waiting. And he's got his plan, which is to stand strong and stand firm and show everyone else how great he is. And as he's white-knuckling the plan, Jesus has other plans to teach and to help, to instruct in humility. And we'll see what happens next week with that plan. So where are you with your plans? What plans do you have? Maybe you have plans to go to In-N-Out Burger afterwards. Yum. And how hard are you holding on to that plan? Maybe really hard, like it's really good. Do you have plans for this week? I'm going to do a lot of homework, and I'm not going to get sucked into YouTube. Oh, whoa. Oh, wow. I didn't know that was going to hit something so hard. Like, whoa. You got plans of when you're going to retire. You're going to have plans on what you're going to do with your kids or your grandkids. You're going to have plans. How tightly do you hold on them, or do you trust? And maybe you see it right now. Wow. I had other plans, but God is doing something, and it's incredible to watch. Am I free to let go of my plans to trust in God's plan? Let's pray.